My name is Matt Ramsey. I'm the Communication Director of Alumni Engagement with Pi Kappa Phi. Thank you for watching The Third Decision. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can take personal responsibility for your finances. I'm joined by Joe Templin, an initiate of the Alpha Tau chapter at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. He serves as the chaplain of the alumni chapter and on the Council of Advisors for the undergraduate chapter. Joe is the Human Kaizen Expert. He's published 15 books, including 4 top 10s and 2 number 1 new releases, Everyday Excellence, and today's topic, Financial Mistakes of Young Professionals. He's also the father of a special needs son and co-host of the Speaking of the Spectrum podcast. He's the former president of the Autism Society of the Greater Hudson region, a partner organization of the Ability Experience. Fitness being a huge part of Joe's life, he's completed 3 ultramarathons, 20 Ragnars, and takes on new challenges as a Team Abex ambassador. And he's an international Chung Do Kwan Taekwondo champion with a master rank. Joe's done many things, all revolving around his Human Kaizen philosophy of making personal developments every day, a philosophy that shows up in his financial coaching. Joe, thank you for taking the time to chat. Let's kick things off by you saying hello and telling us a little bit about your finance background.
Matt, it's so good to see you again, brother. So I did not come into financial planning in the normal route, which seems to be the way for every single person that I've talked with. Very few of us grew up saying, I want to sell investments, I want to sell insurance, I want to do financial planning for a living. I started life as a physicist. I started college when I was 13 because my parents said 12 was too young. I used to be wicked smart. And I finished my degree in physics and my communications degree, rolled into doing my master's in physics, realized, not really for me. They also cut some of the funding for the project. So I started doing my MBA in finance because I always wanted to rule the world that way too. And simultaneously, I was looking around for an internship. And we lost our family farm around that point. My godfather and namesake, who was a great engineer, had no financial planning done. He had a 20-plus-year-old will, and I wasn't going to spend 3 years going to law school, so I decided to go into financial planning. And I ended up focusing almost exclusively on working with young professionals, our brothers who are just graduating to help get them a start in life. And I tended to do a lot of work with nerds, given my background. So throughout my career, yes, I earned my CFP. In fact, I actually now write questions for the CFP exam. I earned my CLU, Chartered Life Underwriter, CHFC, Chartered Financial Consultant. I was one of the first 100 CAPs in the country, Chartered Advisor of Philanthropy. That's why I do a lot of work with ABEX and other charities. I also have my Certified Executive Counselor, my Master Certified Executive Counselor, and as of Christmas time, I will be working on my PhD.
Awesome. Your hunger for knowledge, has really shown up in a lot of places. And I think that's from all of the conversations that you and I've had. I think when you ask a question, you've got that itch to really get down to the bottom of it. So with personal finance, you talk a lot about an equation that want minus have equals need. And I think that's a really fascinating approach, but could you just walk us through your general philosophy around personal finance?
Sure. So one of the big things is that it's not my goal. It's not my plan. It's whoever I was working with goals and plans. So I'm not here to make value decisions on if you want to make, $20 million and retire by the time that you're 30 and live on a pirate ship. Okay, let's figure out how to do that. If you want the white picket fence and golden retriever and 2.2 kids with the minivan, all right, let's figure out how to get you there. So it's not up to me to make a value decision. It is up to me to understand, to look at the world through your eyes, but with my financial knowledge, and to figure out not just the best way, but multiple ways to get you there, simply because life's going to happen. Murphy's Law is always in existence. So we need to make sure that we have flexibility built in so that if you're 15 years with the company and they have a major downsizing, you're not going, oh crap, what do I do with the rest of my life? You're in a position to be okay. If you decide down the road, hey, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm going to go into my own business, or I want to go become, a minister or whatever. I needed to make sure that you had the capacity to do that. And my mom being an educator and having taught in various capacities for most of my life and or coached, I needed to make sure that you had a good fundamental understanding. So I always took an education first approach to work with my clients so that they could make good financial decisions for their future.
Absolutely. So it's like, I mean, most things, right? You've got a self-guided kind of path, but it's about seeking a base level understanding and then kind of working with somebody to make more strategic choices.
Exactly. And part of my responsibility was to be a resource for them. So I had a focus on every interaction that I had with a client or anybody at this point. I needed to make sure that they were better off afterwards than they were before. That I helped them in some capacity. That might be with giving them new ideas. That might be helping them solve a problem. That might be, just being a listening ear as they talk through an issue with their fiance or their teenage kid. Having teenage kids, there's lots of problems there. So being able to just make sure that at the end of whatever time we were spending together, they were moving in a better direction and feeling better about themselves and their future. Because there's a lot of anxiety in the world, a lot of angst, a lot of uncertainty, and activity and a plan help kill anxiety. So if you've even got the preliminary component of a plan, 12%, as Star-Lord would say, you are feeling better than if you're wandering around with absolutely no clue. So if we can get a little bit more vision and a little bit more direction, meeting after meeting over time, then eventually people are really locked down in terms of being able to get where they want to go. And so that's how the Human Kaizen idea of continuous improvement relates with the financial component, because we're not going to solve all your financial problems tomorrow unless you just won the Mega Millions for $300 million.
Yeah.
If you did, you're buying drinks next time. But what it is a process of improving and approaching your goals.
And so really, I think that's what we're going to hopefully take the first step in doing today for everyone watching, is to take the first step of understanding the direction you can kind of move in, and empower people to go on from there. So while there might not be like one size fits all model for a personal finance plan that anyone can implement today, there are definitely financial mistakes that are more common. And so in your book, you talk about the financial mistakes of young professionals. What are those financial mistakes?
Well, there's literally thousands of ones, and having worked with tens of thousands of clients, some of the ones that I could tell you would like make your hair curl or stand up on end, but a lot of the big ones. One is following other people's plans. So 30 years ago, people would graduate and they'd go to work for like General Electric, which no longer exists anymore, and plan on staying there for 30 years, getting their pension. Most pensions don't exist unless you're working for a governmental organization in some form, and get their gold watch and retire. That's not the way of the world. Nor is it that you're going to go and you're going to work for a tech company and you're going to get hundreds of millions of dollars in stock options and retire at 30 on your pirate ship. That generally doesn't happen either. And being young men, very often our parents have a vision of what they want. So for example, when I told my mom when I was getting out of grad school that no, I wasn't going to go and pursue my PhD in physics, that I was going to go sell insurance, she literally cried. She's like, I thought you were going to get you a PhD and work with Carl, who's my best friend who is a PhD in physics. And, she was just like all upset. And it took her years. And, literally, I was like top 2 or 3% in the entire profession before she's like, yeah, I think you made the right choice. And my dad had his own firm, his own business that he had built. And his goal was that at 35, I was going to become the vice president. And at 40, I was going to take over as president. He was going to retire. So a lot of people have these plans that other people want for them. And you need to discover what's right for you based on your education, your belief system, your mindset, also who you are biologically. I mean, you and I are ADHD. So that means that we should not be sitting there being accountants.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it is a misalignment in some ways. So that capacity to be able to discover who you are and what you really want to do unlocks your potential in a lot of ways. 75% of Americans hate their job. Now, there's always some components of our job that we absolutely hate, but when you're dreading going into work in the morning, that is probably a sign of, yeah, this is not the space or place for me. And I should probably make a change for my physical health, my mental health, and my long-term growth.
So really with your finances, like as one, if you take a path in life that you're not passionate about, it's going to be hard to create that monetary foundation to work with. Would the same thing apply? Like you can't just pull a how-to off the shelf for a financial plan and think it's going to fit your lifestyle?
Because if somebody's goal is to leave their company in about 5 or 6 years, go back and get a master's or PhD, and then take a slight, detour in their career into a different direction, then planning on staying with that company for 30 years and getting their pension or some of the other assumptions don't make sense. If somebody's an entrepreneur and they've got, lumpy cash flow, 1 month they'll make 10,000, next month they make 2,000, having that sort of model versus a static state of you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks and next year you're going to get a 4% raise and this and that. And here's your benefit plan as opposed to having to create it yourself. Those are very different models and they're different journeys in life. So we need to make sure that the plan is designed for that individual in that journey. And so that's where the flexibility that I talked about comes on in, because the best laid plans of mice and men, and then the universe, laughs at you. But also it's taking advantage of what you have. I see a lot of young professionals who weren't getting involved in their 401k. Now, the default now is that you do get involved, but they weren't getting involved in their 401k and they stayed in a place 3, 4, 5 years and they missed out on all the free money from the company.
Yeah.
Or ones where there's educational benefits, where the company will help pay for a master's with tuition reimbursement. And it's like, you're still in that learning mindset from being in college. Continue in that for a while. Continue to defer some of the pleasure for the future. Get that secondary degree potentially, especially if somebody else is going to help pay for it, because that's going to leverage your earnings. And it's just going to put you at a higher level within your profession, no matter what you are doing, by having more relevant knowledge.
Yeah. So what are some of the other mistakes that we see outside of, not picking your own or picking your own plan?
One of the biggest ones is not budgeting. I see a lot of people who, they get their paycheck and, they spend money on their rent and their groceries and stuff like this. And then they go out with their buddies and they're doing all this fun stuff. And at the end of the month, they've got basically, some change on the desk and a couple of wadded up singles left over, and they try and save out of that. Okay. So it is budgeting your money, but also budgeting your time, because we all have 1,440 minutes in a day. Don't care if you're Bill Gates or, the newest initiate, you have the same allocation there. So how are you going to allocate it? One, you should allocate a certain portion every single day to taking care of yourself physically. Because if you're not taking care of yourself at 21, you're going to develop bad habits. By the time you're 35, your pants don't fit and you're having trouble walking upstairs. But if you invest 45 minutes to an hour each day in physical activity, that actually is one of the best productivity tools that you can have. It will keep you mentally sharp. It will keep you physically younger. You're going to outperform at work. So taking that time every single day is going to help you in a work capacity. It's also going to help with your mental acuity. It's going to keep you sharp. You're going to be able to learn more things quicker. So that's going to accelerate your development, whether it's academically or professionally. And being able to budget the time for these other things, like having friends. For example, once you get out of school, you're going to start losing contact with individuals. Being able to take the time to focus on strengthening your social network and maintaining those friendships with your brothers from your class and from your house and maybe other chapters and people from your school and these things. That's going to help you, especially when you get really old and gray like me, because once you hit 40-ish years old, you start losing all these connections. And those social connections are one of the best things for your mental health. So budgeting the time for your physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your relationships, in addition to budgeting your money, is one of the best things that you can do for yourself physically, financially, and in all other capacities.
And I mean, when we're working off of a schedule where we're conscious of how we're spending our time, that helps us to be more responsible with how we spend our money.
Exactly.
Not enough room in the day to make some of those quick impulse decisions of,
The big ones is that, oh, I didn't, plan ahead this morning. I didn't, take out the stuff to defrost to be able to make dinner. I'll just grab something on the way home. And you grab something that, one, is more unhealthy, two, has a greater cost, and three, you think that you're saving time. The time savings is not that wonderful. So you're negatively impacting your body, which impacts your mental health, which also impacts your budget because you didn't budget the time in the morning.
yeah. I know one of the things that you mentioned, like in taking care of yourself, it sets you up for success today, but I think it also protects your future. And a concept that we've talked about before, and I know that is a big part of your kind of financial mindset, is to protect yourself and the importance of making sure that you're covered and risk is managed in that way. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So every 20, 22, 24-year-old, especially young men, we're invulnerable. Okay. Nothing can happen to us. We go out drinking, we bounce back the next morning, we fall down the stairs, we stand up, brush ourselves off, and, move forward. We all do stupid things. It's part of being a guy. Okay. And it's part of being young. But you got to remember, you're not completely invulnerable. My best friend had a heart attack at 18 years old. Right? My best friend from my pledge class died during COVID. Okay? I had a young computer scientist that I was working with early in my career. 22 years old. He's like, dude, I sit in front of a computer. I'm not jumping off of buildings. I'm not wrestling bulls. I'm not doing any of this crazy stuff. What could happen to me? I don't need any coverage. I fought him to supplement his group disability insurance coverage to protect his income. So if anything happened to him, he became sick or injured, he'd continue to have this cash flow coming in. And after 2 or 3 meetings, this guy, DJ, agreed to spend the $7.16 per month to supplement his disability insurance. 4 months later, he had a mental nervous breakdown. He was in a facility for a while. I actually was got on the list so I could visit him. I took care of him afterwards. He was unable to ever go back to being a computer programmer because of mental stress. To this day, he is still collecting benefits. It was like $800 a month at that point. It's grown with inflation over the past 25 plus years. And every year until she died, his mom sent me a Christmas card thanking me. Okay. So we think we're invulnerable, but cancer is prevalent. There's stupid people out there. So it's not you riding your motorcycle that's going to cause a problem. It's someone not seeing you and crashing into you. It's the electromagnetic radiation coming off of the screens that we're walking around with all the time, and you've got your cell phone in your front pocket. It's all these other environmental factors and the other people. And so because of that, if your income is disrupted, your dreams stop.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, they think, well, health insurance, I know I'm going to need to get that. And it's in a lot of contracts when you're starting in a new company, and disability insurance is one of those small things down at the bottom. And so most people don't think about that extra coverage, but that's a really great point. And I think it does go such a long way in protecting.
And one of the big things is disability insurance. It's not just your age and health that they rate on. It's also what you do for a living. So, guys who went to RPI, Alpha Tau alumni, they're almost all engineers. So they're the lowest possible risk class because they sit in front of computers all day long. But if you want to go out and be a business owner and be an entrepreneur and run your own business, suddenly you're responsible for finance and marketing, and you're the chief cook and bottle washer, and your stress levels go through the roof. All of a sudden, you're uninsurable for a year or two potentially to buy disability insurance. But if you bought it as the highest occupation class, the least expensive, You get to keep that. And so you can take it with you as stuff. So it gives you flexibility, it gives you portability. That thing that I talked about before about making sure you have options in your life. This is one critical component. And it's so dirt cheap for young men that there's no reason to not get it.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it is less than a cup of coffee a week for most young men.
What if you had to pick like one more mistake that's easily avoidable, what would that be?
The, a huge one is, and this one's actually getting a lot of publicity these days, so I'm really proud of that, is that maxing out your 401k, you're going to pay the stupid tax. And what I mean by that is money that goes into a 401k is pre-tax dollars. So you're avoiding the taxes now. That grows tax deferred, meaning it's not paying any tax along the way. But at the end, that full chunk is completely and totally taxable as income when you pull it out. And the Congressional Budget Office was saying 15 years ago that we'd have to raise tax rates 50% to cover the deficit that we had then. Before COVID hit, they were still saying that we had to raise tax rates over 60%. We are going to see tax increases over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So for the young men coming out who are in their 20s now, they are going to be looking at 50% income tax rates down the road, maybe even 60. So putting money into your 401k, you're avoiding the current taxes. And where are you on your earnings curve? When you're 22, 23, unless you're playing for the New York Yankees, you're near the low end of your income curve.
Yeah.
As you get experience, as you move up the corporate ladder, as you get more powerful in your career, you're going to climb the corporate ladder. You're going to be more successful in your business. You're going to make more and more money. So your actual maximum earnings is generally some point in your 50s, 60s. So why are you avoiding a 22 or 25% tax rate now to pay a 50% tax rate? Most companies will match on your 401k. That's the big retirement plan that most people have, young men. So they will match like 50 cents on the dollar up to 6% or 7%. So if I put in 6%, the company's going to put in 3%. And that's free money. That's the best money in the world. That's awesome. Okay. But with a 401k, you can put in up to 10, 12, 15%. You can put in up to, I think the current number is 18,000. That goes up with time. But anything over that matched amount, that money is growing and it's going to be fully taxable down the road. So the way to maximize your value to play tax rate arbitrage and pay the minimum amount of taxes and get the most money in your pocket is to contribute the matched amount into the 401k to get the free money, because free money is good money. Write that down. Then do what's known as a Roth IRA. That is an after-tax vehicle, so you've already paid taxes on it, and grows completely and totally tax-free. If you take it out in retirement, that money's grown totally tax-free. And if you look for the same cash flows, adjusting for taxes and everything, between maxing out a 401k or getting the matched amount and then contributing to Roth IRA, it's literally the difference of $750,000 come retirement. That's real money, guys. That's a big nut. But also you can access it beforehand for certain things. So it gives you some flexibility. And it's yours. You control it. You can choose whatever investments are out there as appropriate for you. Talk to your financial advisor, disclosure. But it just puts more money in your pocket for the same cash flows by being slightly more intelligent about it. And there's some other things that we can do, like 7702 plans or other things to back end into it if you're above the earnings limit or if there's other constraints. But it allows you to be able to take control of your financial future. And that's where the discipline, that's where the responsibility comes on in, is understanding the rules of the game so you can win.
Absolutely. And so just to kind of summarize on the financial mistakes that most young professionals tend to make, it's following somebody else's plan, not budgeting your time or your finances, not covering yourself in the case of risks, and not maximizing like your tax benefits by matching your 401k and investing in other avenues that are going to shelter your money a little better.
Yes, sir. Those are the big mistakes. If you take care of addressing those concerns, you're 3/4 of the way to retirement and to having financial freedom down the road.
That's a pretty easy thing to be aware of and start making incremental changes to work against those. And so I know
It's actually
that
simple, not easy. There's a difference. Okay, the guidelines are pretty clear. It's, oh, I actually have to do it. I
Yeah.
actually need to take the time to understand this a little bit. I need to build a relationship with a professional that can assist me. So that's where a lot of the trepidation, and people are lazy. There's inertia. Newton's first law, body in motion tends to stay in motion, body at rest tends to stay at rest. People don't want to take the first initial step. So that's the big thing, is get started. Because even if you start with a little bit, then you can start improving. It's like trying to get somebody to run a marathon. We're not taking them out for a 10-mile run the first day. We're taking them out and getting them around the block a few times, getting them used to it. And we build up, try and get somebody to lift weights. We're not throwing 300 pounds on the bar. I can't lift 300 pounds anyway, but we're putting the bar on and we're teaching them form. Then we put a little bit more weight on. And over time, it builds up. I had a client years ago, and because he was paying for his own graduate school and everything, he'd only start saving 2% for retirement. But he'd get a raise every 6 months. And so what he did is he saved almost all of his raise. He didn't change his lifestyle at all for 3 or 4 years. And so that 2% went to 3%, went to 4%, went to 5% within 5 years, because he got a couple of promotions along the way. He was saving 10% for retirement. He was saving 5% elsewhere. And by the time this guy, who was struggling when he was 22 years old because he didn't have a lot of cash flow, by the time he was in his early 30s, he was more than on track for his entire financial future, because he started and then got a little bit better with it and got a little bit better with it. And that's how we do everything in life.
Yeah. And so that really segues into the next thing that I wanted to discuss, which is, talking to young professionals, talking to guys who are about to graduate, just graduated. They're figuring everything out. While might not be like an ideal game plan, what are the ideal first steps to really start taking control of your financial
Read
future?
this book. That's why I wrote it. That's part of it. Because
Yeah.
literally, that book lays out not just the concepts, but some planning. It's got a lot of the mathematics, it's got a lot of the horror stories and frequently asked questions. So I wrote this book for those young professionals that I personally could not reach. But, sit down with HR and get your benefits book so that you understand that. Even before then, when you get your job offer, how much are you going to make? See if you can get the benefits book and start putting together a budget. There's all sorts of online templates that you can use just to get a preliminary idea, and start talking with people, start doing some research. You can go to Wikipedia, you can go to Investopedia and find out some of the basics. You can just play around on Google for 15 minutes and get some basic ideas. Now, you're going to get some misleading information, ads and sponsored stuff and all that. But if you spend 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there, little chunks, you're going to start developing your fundamentals. And if you know somebody who's already graduated, hey, who's your financial advisor? Do you have somebody? What should I be looking for? And find somebody to help guide you who knows what they're talking about. Because what we were talking about, following somebody else's plan, find somebody who can help you either craft your own plan or point you to somebody to help craft your own plan. And by doing that, it's going to help you move in the right direction. And again, take control over your financial future.
Absolutely. I mean, even, plenty of guys come out of college, right? They got a degree in business. They feel like they've got a good kind of acuity of understanding what's going on, but finance is a really complex thing. And especially when you get into all the minutia of it,
I walked out when I finished up working on my MBA in finance. My buddies who did their MBA in finance with me, they're like, oh, we don't need it. I'm like, dude, you can figure out a Black-Scholes model on pricing an option, but do you understand the provisions of your disability insurance and what the definition of disability is? No. Have you ever done a budget for yourself? Yeah, I know you can do a corporate budget for a $7.5 million division, but what about your budget? What's your emergency fund to protect you in case something bad happens? Because something bad always happens. My older brother sent me a picture this morning. He was pouring himself a cup of tea. The teacup exploded, and he's in the burn unit with his entire leg, second-degree burns.
it happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's best to go to the expert.
Yeah. And one of the other things about being an expert is I've got just enough of I don't care because it allows me to not be emotionally involved. So I have friends who had, gazillion dollars in stock options, but because it was theirs, they made emotional decisions as opposed to rational decisions. And so I had one guy who had like $15 million on paper. We had put together a plan for exercising them so he could take some of the money off the table, but he didn't execute the plan because he got all emotional about it and he ended up losing all of it. Okay. So having an external perspective, having a different idea, having somebody to bounce the ideas around and have somebody be able to say, hey, you know what, man, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. We all need that. We're going out with our buddies for the night. And one of the guys says, hey, man, I don't think that's a good idea. You're probably going to listen to them and you're probably going to make a slightly better decision because you have a different perspective. I've had clients that wanted to drop a ton of money into a company and I investigated and it's like, oh, that's being run by a felon. You don't want to do that. Or, other choices like that. So just being able to have that extra set of eyes and that trusted relationship where you can talk things over. I mean, I've got one of my former clients who still calls me up once a quarter. We sit down. He's like, I just want your perspective on things so that he can make better choices. And this guy runs $100 million fund, I think. But he just wants to hear my perspective in general on things. And that's what a good advisor in all capacities should do. Your big brother helped educate you in the fraternity, helped give you good decisions. Why? Because they'd been there and they'd had a lot more experience. Okay. Your big brother or your archon is able to sit down with you and say, hey, man, I need you to do this to help you be the best that you can be to help the chapter.
Yeah.
Your mentor at work does the same things. This is what a good advisor should be doing for you, is not selling stuff, not shoving stuff down your throat, not beating on you, but building a relationship so they can look out at the world through your eyes and understand, but with their knowledge and say, based on everything you're talking about, I think these are the better things for you to do.
Yeah. So when choosing an advisor, what are a couple of things that somebody should look for?
One, they got to have the proper credentials. Okay. So they need to have their state level life, accident, health licenses. They should have the proper investment licenses, which are issued on a national basis. They should be working for a reputable firm. They should be a member of their professional association so that they're getting additional knowledge and credentialization. You can check to see if they've got any complaints against them. And beyond all that, you need to be comfortable with them. So there are some people who I've worked with in the past who I was not the best fit for them because of personnel. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I had other individuals that I would work with, other advisors, and I'd pass them off. Another thing is their focus. I worked almost exclusively with nerds and tech businesses. I had no clients that were doctors. I don't know how doctors think. It's just, if any doctors listening, I'm sorry, guys. I'm just not your guy. But an engineer, oh yeah, I speak geek. So, I would like literally put the spreadsheets out. I would put the equations up on the board. We would go through things. We totally nerd out. So for that sort of person, I was the right advisor.
Yeah.
For somebody who had just a different sort of career path, I did not work with professional athletes. Okay. I know several, I know a bunch of, successful musicians and all that. I was not the right guy for them based on what I was doing. So you'll find the right advisor based on your sort of path, your set of mindset, your skill set and all that, and what that advisor brings to the table. So don't be afraid to talk to a couple of them. That's one thing, you probably talk to multiple girls before, starting really to get serious with one. Talk to a couple of financial advisors.
Yeah, absolutely. And so really it's check to make sure they've got the right credentials, do the research on them, but then also make sure that it's going to be a good personality fit so you can have that trust relationship and a solid coaching atmosphere.
Yep. And if anybody wants to DM me on LinkedIn, I connect with any PICAP anywhere. Just, send me a message and I'll help you find somebody because I've got contacts all over the place. I can help triage the right individuals for you.
Absolutely. There's a ton of frequently asked questions when it comes to to finance. And as we think about those, there's there's a few that I want to ask you about to kind of wrap
Sure.
up our conversation. Life insurance. When do you need to get life insurance? Is it, is that something that people should look at later in life?
So life insurance is an interesting tool because most of the time when people decide that they want it, they can't get it anymore. Very similar to like long-term care insurance.
Mhm.
So life insurance is not a commodity like a mutual fund where anybody can buy it. There's no restrictions. There is a health insurance component associated with it, where there's a rating based on how healthy you are, and it's based on age also. So the younger and healthier you are when you buy it, the more cost effective it is, and the better it acts as an accumulation tool. So do you need $1.5 million of life insurance right out of college, which is what the present value of your incomes, your human life value essentially, would dictate for a lot of people? No. But having the ability to get it down the road, because your life insurance need looks sort of like a wedding cake. You start off with a very low amount, then you get out of school and you have your student loan, so your need jumps. Then you find your partner and you get married and you become financially independent, so your need jumps. Then you buy a home, need jumps. You have a bunch of kids, need jumps. So it's pretty high. And it steps up, steps up, steps up. You go across time, then the kids start going to college, so that drops down. Then the mortgage is paid off. Get out here by retirement, so it steps up and that steps down too. But there's always a component early on and later, whether it's for pension maximization or it's for charitable planning. I mean, when I get hit by the bus, PICAP is getting a bunch of money from my life insurance. Don't push me under the bus, please. But there's all these, maybe you're trying to take care of estate taxes or pass down a legacy. So there's always going to be this need along the path. So what a lot of young, healthy individuals do is they buy a little bit, guarantee that they can get more down the road, and then they just review their situation every couple of years or whenever they go through a life-changing event. You get married, that's a big deal. You should review everything that you're doing financially. You have kids, same sort of thing. So it comes back to what I talked about of making sure you have that flexibility. So life insurance is a good tool. You should have some, you should have the right amount, and having an advisor will help you walk through what is appropriate for you at that stage in the game.
Yeah. Now, student loans, you mentioned that, and that's definitely something that any young professional, anybody who's just graduating is going to have to grapple over the next couple of years and really long after that. They're probably facing like a decade's worth of loans to pay off.
Yeah, I mean, the average new graduate has somewhere around $35,000 to $40,000 worth of student loans. And by the way, if you get hit by the bus, they come after your family for those loans. That's one of the reasons why you buy life insurance, by the way, because you have debts. You buy
Yeah.
life insurance because you love somebody or you owe somebody. So I love Pi Kappa Phi. That's why there's some insurance on me to cover that, to take care of them. I also love my kids, so I have some money there. And I have a obligation to my ex-wife, so technically I owe her. So that's why there's some insurance there to cover those things. So the student loan, though, is part of the overall debt discussion
Yeah.
because you have credit cards from all those nights out of burritos and tacos and margaritas while in college. You might have a car loan. You probably have a loan to get some stuff for your apartment. So you have some debt in terms of car, maybe consumer, and student loans. So the approach is you pay off first worst. Whatever the highest interest rate debt is, that's what you should be paying. So typically student loans right now are like 5.5% to 6%, depending when you got them. And credit card debt's going to be at like 9%. Well, 9 is more than 6. So you should be paying that first because that's a delta of like 3%. But the other thing to keep in mind is good debt versus bad debt. Taking out a student loan is good debt because you're getting an education. Hopefully you're going to make more money because you build a career from it.
Yeah.
And it gave you the opportunity to have the Pi Kappa Phi experience, which is completely and totally priceless. But so good debt tends to have some tax advantages to it. So if I borrow money for my business, that's tax deductible on my interest. For student loans now, they are tax deductible. Back in the day when I graduated and dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was not tax deductible. So your 6% student loan is actually not costing you 6%. Because you get to deduct the interest, it's really only about 4%. Your 9% credit card for those burritos, that's a pure 9%. So that makes it even more. Okay, your car loan's probably 6, 7, 8%. So it's at the interim. So pay off the highest interest rate loans first, then start cascading it. Once you pay that off, take the extra and move it to the next one and the next one. And that's going to be the most mathematically efficient.
So another question that comes up a lot of times is people try to grapple what to do after they've finished a 4-year degree and grad school really becomes an option, and it's still like a hard choice to make. So what would you say to somebody considering grad school?
So, my undergrad degree was physics. And with physics, basically, you either went on, got a PhD, or you went and worked for the government. You went and worked for a research lab, you went to the CIA, or maybe a hedge fund would hire you as an analyst because you were so brilliant. So those were the paths. So almost all of us took that go to get your master's approach. And social work is the same in a lot of ways, that you really have to do that to get going. If you're not completely sure about doing grad school, if you're really focused on like, yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to keep going, I love this field, then deferring grad school for a year or two might be the right choice. Because I was halfway through my master's in physics when I realized that I really hated it. I was taking the graduate electromagnetic theory class, and I was doing a calculation from the book that every other graduate physicist on the planet was doing. I'm like, all the math, physics is the first line, the rest of it's all math. And I was a good physicist, but in that space, you need to be exceptional to be able to do anything, which, partially inclined me to moving over because my advisor also said, hey, you got to stop writing and doing martial arts. You got to commit to just doing physics. I'm like, I'm ADHD. No. So that's one component of it. Two is, what is it going to buy you? Because there's a financial cost to do it. You got to pay your tuition if your employer's not paying for it, or you're not getting tuition assistance. And there's a time cost on it. Are you going to take 2 years out of the workforce to do it? Are you going to take 3 or 4 years and do it part-time? So is that worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Yeah. So if your master's degree is going to increase your earnings by at least 25%, you should do it. If it's going to be less than that, you need to seriously consider whether this is the best investment of your time and money.
Yeah, that definitely clarifies a good approach when it comes to that. Those are some of the frequently asked questions that I'd kind of mark down to ensure that we covered for everyone. But as we just finish up, in a final thought, what is the important things that folks need to do when it comes to taking responsibility for their personal finance?
It's the same thing that they need to do to take personal responsibility for their health, for their relationships. What feels good in the moment might not be what is best for you long term. So disconnect from the hedonic feedback loop and look at it and ask yourself, if my best friend were going to do this, would I support them, or would I tell them, that's probably not the right choice? Because who's the best friend that you'll ever have? Should be yourself. Yeah. And so loving yourself and having that tough love, that discipline around it, that is what will ultimately lead you to having the best outcomes.
Yeah. And we covered a lot of different things today, but I think we really made strides in laying that first foundational kind of step for anyone just starting out, so they can start approaching personal finances with that level of responsibility and self-accountability, and walk them towards a path where they're going to have a a successful future that falls in line with what they want. So thank you for this conversation. I know that folks will definitely benefit from what we've shared. And I'll make sure that as we move forward, we'll pass along those resources and things that you mentioned.
Pat, thank you for the opportunity to help and to serve my brothers.